Super. Thank you, and thank you for staying with us after lunch. We'll try to keep you awake. I got a question at lunch, and somebody said, you don't really know the features of Google Analytics very well. And I was like, no, I don't anymore, because I moved on to something else, data ethics specifically. And if you want to understand where I'm sitting now, I recommend this article that was published in The Guardian last weekend. And it says, squirrels reporting, so that's kind of us and the person that's walking downstairs, on remote-controlled data cows. That's the vision of the European Parliament about what we are doing in terms of data. And so I spent a decade doing what you guys do. And now, over the last 3 years, I've spent 3 years talking to lawyers. And I'm interested in understanding the issues from the analytics sector to understand the legislative part of privacy and vice versa. So I talk about analytics to the lawyers and I talk about privacy to you guys. And at some point, hopefully, there's going to be some bridge and we start understanding each other. So what I did to prepare this panel, I sent through 10 horrible questions to all of you. It's like hammer them down. This is what I'm thinking. And this is what we wanted to discuss. The interesting thing is we have 2 Americans, a Canadian and a European. So that's kind of not gender balance, but that's something else. So I think that would be interesting to share thoughts about the privacy debate. In terms of legislation, the European Parliament, of which this sir is president of, Martin Schulz, just passed a piece of legislation called the General Data Protection Regulation. They agreed on it at the end of last year. So I know we've all been struggling with cookies, and well, we should probably revisit this at some point. In the meantime, we have 2 years to build bridges and start understanding each other. So as I'm also on the chair of training for the International Association of Privacy Professionals, my first question is, why don't we understand lawyers? And what can we do to make them understand what we do, what should they do, what should we do, and things like that to start bridging that gap of understanding? So thoughts about that?
They speak a foreign language?
Uh-huh. Yeah, and we do too.
Yes.
Double translation leads to nothing, right?
So lawyers are in the industry of risk management. A corporate lawyer's responsibility is to make sure that the company doesn't get into trouble. And I think one of the most revealing things that you mentioned in your presentation was that if you do something wrong with data, the lawyer gets fired because they didn't protect the company against you. Mm-hmm. So it's an uncomfortable relationship. They are trying to tell us what to do in an area that they have no knowledge. And the European Union, God bless them, are creating rules that are technically impossible to comply with. So we're not starting off on a good foot.
Yeah. I think from my perspective, in Canada, there's a law called PIPEDA that has like 10 points. But if you search for PIPEDA and try to find in human words what those 10 points are.
In human analytics technical words, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And you look at those 10 points and it's like pages and pages and pages of wording that I don't care. Like, just give me 10 simple points that I can abide by and I will start to do something. But if you ask me to read lawyer terms and all those, I simply won't.
So what do you want to do? Do you want lawyers to sit next to you and understand what you're doing? Do you want lawyers to go on a crash course on Google?
Dumb it down. Make it super simple
to
understand for the normal being.
A lawyer's job is to understand the law and explain to me how I should behave in order to comply with that law, because I did not go to law school. I cannot understand it.
So there's something in between that needs to happen. There are job descriptions called privacy engineers. Yeah, nobody knew that.
Nope.
So, and
That's
the
a new one.
First ones are Google and Facebook are hiring privacy engineers that kind of do this middle ground.
They do the
two.
translation from
Yes.
one language
Yes.
to the other. Right?
Yeah, so it's starting to happen. Lawyers are getting slightly more technical. Certain people in analytics are starting to ask questions about the law, which is a good thing. But there's like, it's true, there's, you know, a divide between the two, and the question is, how do we translate this to, as Jim said, diminish the risk of data uses?
Yeah.
So that's the objective, yeah.
I'd like to ask a little bit more fundamental question. You talk about the lawyers who are spokespeople or reactive to legislation. I'm very curious about what we do as an industry in relationship to the legislators who are making legislation in response to society, maybe. Like what's going on in the bodies of legislation that's causing a disconnect between, perhaps, or is there a disconnect between what we're trying to do in our industry in terms of data collection and usage? How do we as an industry relate to the legislative bodies? And perhaps that might be related to your question about the lawyer's role in how do we communicate to legislators, because if we're going to have to abide by these rules, do they make sense to us? Are we misrepresenting what data is and how it's used in terms of digital analytics, that all of a sudden there's like rules that make no sense? Like you said, I can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? What are we doing as an industry to be able to get across our messaging about what it is that we're doing with data? Why are these sorts of reactions?
So I think I'll maybe take this one, but please, you know, I don't want to monopolize. I think there's been, until 18 months ago, three monkeys attitude. We don't know, we don't want to know, we don't want to speak, and we don't want to hear about it. Certainly also because it's a gulf between Europe and the United States in how we define privacy.
Well, it's a gulf in how we define law.
Yeah, also different things that, you know, there's a sea in between as well. So, so until then, nothing really happened, and technology evolves, as we know, very fast, and certainly faster than the law. Certain bodies are starting to reach out. So it's interesting because Jim was the first one to talk to me about ethics. And I was like, come on, ethics. Ethics is such a vague description. And it felt very US-centered compared to my European right to privacy. But there are initiatives in both sides, in both continents, to start talking about data ethics and define those rules. Certainly in big data and the open source community are starting to discuss data ethics. And the European Data Protection Supervisor also started setting up a board to discuss data ethics and reach out to other communities. And I think this is one of these platforms to start reaching out. Until now, it has been like the three monkeys. The thing that's changing is risk. And so the General Data Protection Regulation, which is one rule for all European countries, the fine is going to go up to 4% of global turnover. 4% of global turnover if you do something that is against the law. 20 million euros max. It's not 3,500 like here in Hungary. 4% of global turnover. So this is going to push companies to start looking at it. The question is also inside our industry, we add tags, we do stuff. Are we responsible? Who is responsible for this? Who should be part of the decision-making about what kind of data am I collecting? We all worry about data leakage. How should we address this issue?
Yeah. I think it's, you know, I'm listening to everything you're saying, and what I hear is lawyers who have who need to protect, and companies needs to be responsible, otherwise they will be fined and everything. But we're all experts in our field. Do we have like examples and scenarios of, under this condition, Like we learn a lot by examples, right? And we don't, in our field, we don't even have examples of, under this condition, under this scenario, are you okay or you're not, right? Simple things, like collecting email addresses without consent. Is it okay, is it not? Under which condition it is? What about date of birth? Or what, you know, very simple, dumb it down. Because everything I hear is, the law is this, the law is that, the consequence is this. But actually on a daily basis, you know, there are some obvious ones. Okay, Google says no PII and GA. Okay, I can understand most of it. Yeah, no emails, no names, no complete address. Okay, I can understand that, but there are other scenarios. So I think collectively would be interesting if we add a number of scenarios and we can augment that under this condition. Like one of my clients actually did something and I told them, you know, you shouldn't do that. Yeah, but we want the data. I understand that, but you shouldn't be doing it. Yeah, but we want the data. No, like, I will obfuscate it. No, but we want the data. Okay, what should I do? Say, okay, I don't want to work with you?
Yeah, or send an email saying, I said this
Oh,
is
yeah,
not a good
that's the
idea,
case.
because
That's what I did.
it's
Cover
about
your
covering
butt.
our
Yeah,
asses
yeah,
first
yeah.
in terms of liability.
But I'm sure in our daily work, we probably see cases where it's on the verge of being okay, but maybe it's not, but we're not too sure. But are we going to contact a lawyer? Probably not, right? Because that's not our job.
So the way laws happen, you do contact the lawyer, and the lawyer says, well, the law isn't actually set yet.
Yeah.
So until there's a regulation, I can't advise you.
Yeah.
As soon as there's a regulation...
By the way, here's the bill.
Yeah. Yeah. And when there's a regulation, I can tell you what to do and what not to do. Yeah. And you, as a business person, have to decide how much risk you're willing to take on. So you're willing to ignore the rules or abide by the rules. That is a cost-benefit analysis. And if you are caught, then the lawyer will, your lawyer will go to court and represent you. And then when a case is decided by a judge, now we have a precedent.
Yeah.
We are how many years away from that?
It's starting. It's starting. So
It's starting.
Yeah.
I think that there's also the space between, there's the law, and then there's the internal policy. And I've seen this a lot with a number of clients where they have internal policies that they apply to themselves that are very arranged. One example that I remember clearly of was this kind of battle we had with a client around, do they use user ID in Google Analytics when that feature became available?
Yeah.
And their internal lawyer said, no, we can't have anything that uniquely identifies a person. Even if it's totally anonymized, we can't have anything that uniquely identifies a person over time and across devices. And that was a real challenge, because on the other hand, the data science team saying, we want this data. We have key business critical questions that we need to answer. And so they had to work through that process internally. Far away from the edge of what the law says, they had to work through that internally to come up with how are we going to do this in a way that either we need to change our policies and then push out a new privacy policy to our customers and get them to agree to it before they start having this level of measurement. And so the legal discussion, I think, is great, but there's the space far between that. And I think, frankly, that's where I see a lot of life happening right now, is between what can we do and what do we need to do and what should we do. We're not even at the point of what is the law yet, because there
Which
isn't.
is why I talk about ethics, because the law says this is the minimum behavior that is allowed. You can only drive this fast. You shouldn't hit people.
Yeah.
And then there's what is ethical. And if you are always right at what's legal, that's a corporate culture question.
Yeah.
So getting back to that, something I hear a lot from the lawyers is, I wasn't aware.
Yeah.
I am not being asked inside these conversations.
We're not even aware ourselves. So
So I'd like to talk a bit about transparency. how could transparency within companies, I have a good example, which is a travel company, a pan-European company that deals in travel, Spanish-based, they'll figure it out. I know the privacy responsible, she's a lovely woman. I know the guys that do big data and mobile, and they're like, we ignore her. She's in trouble. Transparency, how can we help transparency?
Yeah. But I think the key word you said is being aware. You cannot be transparent if you're not even aware of what is going on, right?
So, transparent about what?
Yeah.
What does a lawyer need to know? We don't know. It will require a policy from management to say, these are the things that you will explain, these are the things that you will get permission before you try to do, and we don't have this list.
What is the term for the, isn't there a term for the lawyers? It's the Department of Business Avoidance or something like that? Because by default, the answer is no. No, you can't do it.
And here's why. And that's their job in order to say, here are the reasons you shouldn't do it. Now, you have to decide whether you're going to do it. Yeah. And I've provided you legal advice, and if you do it and you get caught, I have a memo that says, yeah, I told him not to.
Yeah.
Which brings back to the discussion about accountability we had yesterday, I think, and where Doug also said, and you argued for IT and things like that, but the business users, the ones that say we want the data, should, I think, in the end, sign off on we're taking the risk. Can we agree on that, or is it like, no, it's too
It depends on the lawsuit.
It depends on the law. It depends.
It depends on what they're suing you for and which employee you want to throw under the bus.
Yeah. Okay. I'd like to have a hands up. Does anybody know what PIAs are? Privacy Impact Assessments. Yay, one. Do you want to?
Say what it is.
It's a privacy impact assessment.
I would wager that it's some level of understanding both the data collection policies, or knowing what data is being collected, knowing also if there's third party involved, how those third parties take that data and use that data, where that data then flows.
Wow, you're going really far.
Really far. Privacy impact assessment. If I break a privacy issue, how's this going to impact my business?
Yeah.
Am I going to get sued?
Yeah. So privacy impact assessments are the buzzword of the privacy community for the moment, which are hopefully workflow-based documents with questions, sometimes paper-based, which is very scary.
So the assessment is the intake, not the output?
Yes. So it's very static. They usually do privacy impact assessments for new tools. Should we use this new tool, yes or no? What kind of data are you going to collect? Is it PII, yes, no, blah, 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 blah. And if it is, then we need more security, we need this, and we need that. So this is what's surfacing on the privacy side to say the solution for data is PIAs. The problem, as you said, is interconnection, data flows, evolution.
Well, I also have come across some personal client work where large, organizations are unaware of perhaps what data it is they're even collecting, and then they get an email from the Electronic Frontier Foundation saying, we noticed that you have 18 different tags on your homepage. And nothing wrong with that, but do you know what these do? Because then you can go into like Ghostery and use that image, and all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute. Do you mind if I ask another question?
Sure, go ahead.
How do we, as practitioners, gain also a sense of knowledge about, well, if I do use this sort of, third-party pixel, how do I know where that's going to go in the whole ecosystem of when does Axiom get that and use it for their 1,500 attributes? That was the concern that the EFF raised. And I felt, I'm not embarrassed. I was I don't know how to do that sort of privacy assessment. And what am I good at? I can say, okay, here's how we're going to fire that tag, and here's basically what the tag's going to do and how it's going to be used within marketing, but there's a whole
Yeah.
fuzzy dark side about like, well, what's going on with that information? Where's it going? Who are information brokers? Who had that slide with all the list of Jim?
And the funny thing is, you use Ghostery to uncover those tags, and while you do it, Ghostery collects the data and sell it back to advertisers.
Yeah, okay.
That's fun.
This brings back to different notions. Accountability and terms and conditions of tools. I install a tag. What does that tag do? Does it link to something else, which is a kind of, we trust in the vendors. And so there's a part to be played, okay, for companies collecting data, for agencies and consultancies helping them, but also the tools that say, I will not integrate some kind of DMP and repackage it and then sell it to somebody else, and have those choices in between.
There is a limit of liability at some point. I am using a tag in order to collect this information for this purpose. If the tag company takes that data and does something else, that's not me. I'm not liable for that.
Is that true?
No. It's what I would argue in court.
Yeah.
It's viable up until the point at which your company is bigger than the third-party company and somebody has a class action lawsuit for $1 billion and it crushes the little company, so they go after the big guy.
The lawsuit.
So how do you hedge against that? Who should do this kind of work to make sure that the vendors do what they say that they do and things like that?
Well, the system is when somebody complains and a lawsuit is brought forward.
Yeah.
Now, when we had this conversation at eMetrics in London, the guy who was the head of, I'm not going to get
The ICO.
The ICO, thank you, said that the process is, now that we have this regulation in place, if somebody comes forward and says, that company is misusing my personal data, then it's a complaint. And when they get complaints, they will investigate. And today, if the company comes back and says, yes, we're aware of the rules, yes, we're actively working on figuring out how to manage it, and here's how many meetings we've had and how many memos, and it looks like it'll take us 4 or 5 years to work it all out, they'll say, great, you're working on it, thanks.
Yeah.
No fine.
Yeah. So that's the ICO in the UK. And so Europe is made out of 28 countries and a bunch of other people that listen to us as well. The UK is not France. The UK is not Spain. Spain is responsible for 80% of data protection fines. It's a cash cow in Spain. we make ham and data protection fines, basically, and pay and things like that. So your risk will depend on the country where you are active. Which brings about interesting stuff, because it means that certain big companies that do not have their headquarters in certain countries will test out analytics, borderline analytics, see if it works, and then probably import it into HQ. So the choices that you're going to make in Slovakia will probably not be the same in Germany, and the risk will not be the same. But what you want is homogeneous installation of your data as well. So you're not going to do exceptions for every country. So it's really a risk-based scenario.
Caleb, what do you recommend to your clients? What are you telling them they should be doing?
So they need to, generally the approach is they need to understand, given where they operate, what their regulatory burden is. We can't help you with that. Go talk to an attorney. We'll be happy to talk to your attorney about what we're helping you do. So we sometimes are party to those conversations to help the legal counsel understand what is actually happening so that they can say, yes, this is okay, or no, this isn't okay. It's a challenge. You need ubiquitous, consistent data collection. You take a global brand.
It's never going to happen.
and you want to collect basically the same set of data everywhere. One of the other practical challenges is, well, what is the definition of this site is for this audience? If someone from Spain chooses to go to my American website, I'm not going to, or should I track them differently or not? Or it's kind of gray. So we try to take a line of look at where do you you exist physically? Where are your nexuses, your places of operation? What does your business and legal counsel say you are subject to following as far as regulations? And then what are your internal policies that you've defined? And then overall, what do we need to do with the business or the analytics objectives, and where there are disparities, and we have to make a roadmap to address that and fix that. So it's not a simple thing to answer or to accomplish, but it's a process that we can work through, and it's iterative too, because it's constantly changing.
Can we see that as being, I know from a legal perspective it doesn't matter, but it seems to me there's two types of privacy issues. There's a type that is almost by accident, because it was not intentional, it's something, but there are organizations out there that are just evil, right? They do it on purpose. And they know that they are pushing the limits, but as long as we don't get caught, that's fine. We're going to keep doing it, because in the meantime we make money and it works, right?
What would be an example? Just make one up even.
There's this prince from Nairobi. You may have heard of him.
Yeah. I don't know. What I was referring to in the States, where companies, a lot of companies and startups have created tools that just harvest the data and will indefinitely expand what they might know about you, right? It might be perfectly legal in the States, but they also go beyond the States, and those services are being used elsewhere.
I've seen it in publishing. There are a lot of technologies in the publishing industry that are designed to help enhance publisher revenue. Publishers want to enhance their revenue capture. And these technologies are extremely greedy about the kinds of data that they can collect and ingest. And then they're hooking up to DMPs and DSPs, and they're sharing all this data. And that's where I get really concerned to the question or thought of like, I'm looking at this site and there's 18 or 38 different tags getting loaded, and what is this script file from some server, who knows where, that's daisy chained in from 6 other tags? And what is the risk to that? I also, this last summer I was in Sweden and had a very interesting experience. I was debugging a Google Tag Manager implementation, and there was actually in the middle DNS, the ISP I was connecting through, or maybe a compromised router somewhere between me and the internet, was doing a DNS hack. The Google Tag Manager domain was actually pointing to an IP address that was not Google, and it was returning a JavaScript, the gtm.js file. The contents of it was a fairly simple script that injected ads into the page, or did a JavaScript redirect, pushing me. I was on Facebook and I was trying to figure out, why am I getting pushed to different sites, and when I go to one site I go, like, this is really, really weird. And then debugging GTM for a project I was working on, discovered this, and I'm like, why? This is super scary.
Yeah.
So that's a whole other dimension to privacy, but it's also in security, because that could be used to harvest keystrokes, do all kinds of super scary stuff, let alone collect behavioral data and do something maybe bad with it.
Which was possible before anyway. As soon as you load the script from a different location, it was possible to do that. But with GTM now, you have a big like target with a red light saying, hit me, try to hack me, and because if you do, you're going to be able to inject anything in any website, right? Which is a huge risk.
So there's kind of a quality assurance responsibility we might want to take on a regular basis, because you mentioned I worked on this, and then you leave, and then we move on to projects. This idea that we might, there are tools like Observe, Point, HubScan, and things like that. There are in that space that could actually partially help for this.
Yeah, for sure. But unless you're a big enough organization with big enough budgets,
they're too expensive,
with enough resources and enough knowledge, primary role that we play is probably not to spend many hours testing the website and testing the configuration, testing the data, testing everything, right? Because we also have other things that we need to deliver at some point.
Yeah. There's an interesting story about the ad blockers on Forbes, in putting in malware through the ad blockers. There was like this saga. It's like, look it up. It's in Medium, Forbes ad blockers and adwares, which is interesting as well. We did talk a lot about consumers, their choices.
Ad blockers?
Ad blockers.
Easy.
Okay. Consent, choice, no. Nobody wants to take that, no, clearly.
Consent and choice? Well, the choice and the consent seems to be pretty much now whether you use an ad blocker or not. It's a blanket statement. I want or I don't want.
Well, I'll expand consent. I want Amazon to know who I am across devices. It's convenient. I want to access Facebook from all my devices. Facebook sells my identity, profile, onto an ad network.
You can say identity.
No, it's not. And I meant my profile. To say I live in this location, I'm interested in these things, I am of this age, to an ad network, and then ghostery kicks in and it gets spread all over. How does my consent flow through? And when it gets to the 18th sale, and they say, well, gee, he opted in, how does that work?
Well, you did opt in on Facebook.
But I didn't opt in on the 18th.
Exactly.
So where is that?
So you use an ad blocker so you don't see the ad from Facebook.
Yeah, but you're simplifying it.
Yeah. Well, I like simple things.
You gave the property of your data to Facebook.
Yes.
Read their terms and conditions, anything that you post there belongs to this.
Which, from legal perspective, is fine. But if we look at it from the consumer's perspective, which is where the laws should be coming from, this is consumer protection. If I get retargeting from Amazon for something I just bought from Amazon, I can be upset with Amazon. That's clear. But if I get advertisements for something that is tangential but is clear to me that they're profiling me to send me that ad from a company I have no relationship with, did I consent? And that's a actually much simpler concern than what's actually happening with my data.
What's interesting is, I think big data, certain actors in big data talk about data lineage. So this idea of where does my data go, where it comes from. There was also an article, I don't remember where, but saying that data about us should travel with our rights. So even if it goes to another country, I should have the same rights. And so there's some kind of idea of metadata if I start.
And there is a serious conflict here. In order for me to convince you not to track me, you have to have a cookie on me that says don't track me. So that's an oxymoron. If my rights travel with me, there is a metadata layer of what I have agreed to attached to my identity. Oh, that's out in the wild.
And I think, in some ways, if we take the Facebook example, we, from a legal standpoint and a technical standpoint, yes, by using Facebook and the terms of service and blah, 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 we agree that Facebook is going to use that data, right? That's kind of the legal or the official way of doing it. But as an individual, I might disagree how they use their privilege on in some places, right?
Well, I think
so. It's always my choice.
The best example of that was Caleb's presentation of going into CES, and the sign said, "If you don't want to be tracked, throw away your phone."
Yeah.
This is not viable.
Yeah, exactly.
Wasn't that the same thing with the cookie pop-ups on the European site? Like, use the site or not. That's your two. It's like your two choices. Like, if you're here, good luck. But there's, as a consumer, I don't even know what that means. I don't understand what cookies mean. So my consent to the site's use of cookies is extremely fuzzy because which cookies and are a first-party cookie some sort of analytic software and I can understand why you're using it and it makes sense that you can get aggregate behavior from users of your site to help improve my experience. Or we're taking this data and have some sort of relationship with some sort of data vendor, it's all
Yeah.
lumped into a single consent bucket.
Well, not always. I mean, there are tiers depending on which kind of cookie stuff you use. First party, third party, and I don't remember. But look at trustee, you can like choose and things like that.
And if you read the terms of service, you will know all of it.
And if you read all of the terms and service, you'll die before you click because it's just too long.
I think about like every time I get an update on my iPhone.
Yeah.
You know, update your iPhone. No, I don't want to. It keeps asking me until I do. And then when I do it, before I can, there's this 18-mile long set of terms that I just click accept. Like
Everybody
my
else.
choice is accept it or die.
There is do or not do. There is no try.
Yeah, is that really choice versus I love the convenience of Facebook sign-in or Google sign-in. I hate registering on a new site. And in fact, if someone would just invent for mobile an ability to buy stuff online by just a click of a button, like I'm already signed into Facebook, I trust Facebook, have my payment information there, and then I can just click buy and I don't need to enter my credit card on a mobile device. I'd buy stuff all the time on a mobile device. I trust Facebook, and one of the things that builds trust is often when authenticating using Facebook, not always, but depending on how the application is designed, you can choose. It says, here's the data that's going to be provided. And I can now make a much clearer choice. Oh, I don't want all that going to this third party. No. Or I'll change this, and sometimes you can make modifications to what is used.
So
and that seems like a much more workable
Is it
solution.
getting better? In terms of choices, is it getting better?
No,
You think?
we're just such a thin layer of options. When I am opting into something, the government says, the terms and conditions, what are you collecting? What are you using it for? Do you agree? And the requirement is that this description is complete, clear, and concise. These are mutually exclusive. It's not possible to clearly explain to you in a short amount of time what we might be using your data for in this world of Hadoop cloud cluster where I'm going to collect it and decide later. Oh, and by the way, I'm using machine learning, so I don't know what it's going to decide yet. So that we are facing this, let's protect the population from evildoers. We've got good doers who cannot answer these questions. And so in the middle is risk. And are we willing to take that risk as a culture, as a world? I am willing to drive very fast down a road because all the other cars are going fast and oh, I didn't crash today. But it's dangerous and people lose their lives every day. It's a risk, but we're willing to take the risk.
Okay, so maybe, and also give some time, I don't know where we're kind of...
About 3 or 4 minutes.
What can we do as an industry? Is there anything we can do?
No.
Okay.
We're screwed.
I would say I think there is stuff we can do and must do. Otherwise, the people who don't know how this stuff works are going to decide it for us, and then the lawyers are going to have to battle it out with the people that actually know stuff, and we're going to have things imposed on us that probably aren't ideal for us or the consumer. I think we need to focus on what is good for the end customer. That's what it comes back to. Like the whole point of everything we do in analytics should be to serve the customers better, to help them. Like if we're doing this to get data and be evil, then we should just stop or be stopped. But if we're doing it to make that mobile app a better user experience so the person can do what they want to do to start with, then that's good. We're going actually in the same direction. There's not a conflict.
I would suggest then that the first thing we can do individually is help our companies create a policy that describes what is acceptable ethical behavior that we as a corporation agree to strive for and begin to suggest process for auditability of the fact that we're following those policies.
How many people have a defined company, like statement for why you do digital analytics. What is the point of it?
Description of purpose.
2, 3. So there's a client that I've done some work with, and I was so impressed with their internal description of why they do analytics, and it was the best, most robust one I've seen, where they fully articulated out the why and the who, and they have internal policies and controls around who can get access to what kind of data out of their digital analytics platform, and set the tone for why we're doing this and actually entrain it. And before you get access to the tool, you go through a training where this is presented. And like that would be a great starting point if 100% of people in this room a year from now had done that.
And there's 2 reasons for that. One is to protect yourself in a lawsuit. The other is it's just the right thing to do.
It's good for data quality also. It helps your business.
I was going to ask, is that a document they're willing to share?
I could see.
Because the Digital Analytics Association
Yeah.
would dearly love to take a few of them and create something that we can offer out as a potential
standard, or not a standard, but a starting point.
suggestion.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And that is the responsibility of a professional association.
Yeah.